Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Lush Foliage. In today's video we are going to be talking about another beautiful philodendron. I'll put up the name on the screen. Now this leaf is a new leaf, hence it is slightly brown in color. It is not yet hardened up, so it looks a little different. But this is a mature leaf. You can see it is going to be much more darker in color with a very beautiful sheen on the leaves. Now the leaf did get a little bit damaged in transit. I have recently purchased this plant. Again, this is the older leaf. You can see it is a very beautiful, very velvet kind of a texture on the leaves, and it has a very beautiful shine, the sheen. That's what makes this plant extremely beautiful. Now this philodendron is a climbing plant, so you will have to use either a moss pole, a coir pole, or you can even make the sphagnum moss pole as well, because it prefers to climb. It is an epiphytic plant. It is a climber. Now as and when the plant will start to grow, the leaves tend to grow even more bigger. Now over here, as you can see, one of my leaf is starting to turn yellow, which is a very normal process. The plant is getting adjusted in the new environment. As I said, it is a recent purchase, so the yellowing of the leaves is going to be very normal. Probably one or two, it's a normal thing. This is usually the plant goes through the process of acclimating, so it tends to discard the lower leaves. But over the period of time, the plant will start to grow. It will grow vertically, and as I said, the new leaf usually starts with a lighter color. And as and when the leaf starts to mature, it is going to get darker in color. Right now, the leaf is going to be very soft. And this is where you tend to see the nodes. I will talk about the propagation right away. So if you want to propagate this plant, this is where you will find the nodes. I'm sure you all know how to propagate a philodendron. Just a couple of centimeters below the node is where you do the cutting in order to multiply or propagate your philodendron. It's already putting out the aerial roots. Now these are the aerial roots that tend to attach onto the pole, and that's how the plant tends to take support and starts growing onwards vertically. So if you want to do any kind of cutting, you can go ahead and do a cutting on this. I have already made a video on propagation of philodendron. It is the same process for all the philodendrons. You can check the video. I'll put the link in the description below. So let's talk a little bit in detail about this plant. It's an absolutely easy to grow plant if you give the basic care requirements. Now guys, this plant is slightly expensive, but it's worth it because it's an absolutely beautiful plant. Let's start off with the light requirements. Now guys, you have to offer a good amount of indirect bright light. Ensure that you're not putting this plant out in direct sunlight. Absolutely no to afternoon direct sunlight, otherwise the leaves will get burnt. Some people do offer morning direct sunlight, but this completely depends upon your environment and climate. For me, morning sunlight also does not work out really well. So I prefer to keep all of my foliage plants in indirect but bright light. Probably if your environment allows you to give morning direct sunlight, you can probably give early morning direct sunlight, but to be on the safer side, keep the plant in indirect bright light. It will do quite well. You can grow this plant indoor. You can grow this plant outdoor as well. If you're growing it indoor, ensure that you're keeping it in a place where it receives a good amount of indirect bright light, but the direct sunlight does not fall onto the leaves. Another important thing, do not keep this plant under an air conditioning vent or a heater, otherwise that will damage the leaves. Do not keep it too close to the wall. Same thing, it will attach its roots onto the wall and it can damage the wall as well. Now talking about the soil requirements, I use the same soil mix which I use for all my foliage plants, which is a mix of coco peat, garden soil, sand and perlite. They prefer a well-draining, loose, porous soil. Do not let the plant sit in soggy, wet soil. There has to be a slight amount of moisture but not soggy, wet soil. Otherwise, the plant will have a root rot. Ensure that the pot you're using should have a drain hole so that the excess water can drain out. Now talking about watering, during summers, the same thing applies because they are in their growing period during the summers. The frequency of watering is going to be more during summers and it will reduce during the winters because they tend to go into a kind of dormancy or they tend to slow down their growth. So you will have to check according to your environment. But during summers, increase the frequency of watering. Whenever you see upper layer of soil around 1 to 2 inches is dry, go ahead and do a complete watering until the water starts passing through the drain hole. During winters, reduce the amount of watering. Again, it depends upon your environment and climate and how fast your soil tends to dry. Ensure that do not add fertilizers during the winters. If you want to add fertilizers, you can do it during the summers, which is their active growing period. If you tend to see any kind of insects or pests, ideally this plant might get affected with spider mites or mealybugs. Always do a routine check underneath the leaves. If you tend to see any spider mites or mealybugs, you can go with any organic solution that you have been using all this while. Propagation, I have already spoken about it at the beginning of the video. A few inches below the nodes or the aerial roots, you can go ahead and do a cutting, and then you can either put it into the soil or you can do water propagation. Once you tend to see that the roots have developed in the water propagation in leca, you can go ahead and then transfer it into the soil. It's a pretty easy to grow plant. You do not need to be worried much. Now again, this plant is a tropical plant, so it requires a warmer environment. That's why they tend to grow during the summers, and winters they tend to go into dormancy. Humidity plays a very important role. As I said, these are tropical plants. They prefer a good amount of humidity. Anywhere above 60% is going to work out really well. If you're growing them indoor and your household is very dry, you can use a humidifier. If you're growing them outdoor and if it's dry, you can do a daily misting, a very light mist during the afternoons. You can also keep a water pebble tray beneath, or you can club a lot of plants around it so that it can create some more humidity. Apart from that, it's a very easy to grow plant. This plant is toxic. It belongs to the family of philodendrons, so it is going to be toxic. So ensure that you're keeping this plant away from the reach of small children and pets. Apart from that, while propagation, the sap or the plant milk is also very toxic. Always ensure that you're using gloves, especially if you have sensitive skin. And post the cutting propagation, whether you have used a blade, knife or a scissor, ensure that you wash it thoroughly, because even the sap or the plant milk that stays on the blade or on the scissors can also be toxic, can irritate the skin, so you have to be extremely careful. Apart from that, it's an extremely beautiful plant. As and when this plant is going to climb and it is going to get mature, I will definitely make a video on it, because it is an extremely beautiful plant. It was quite in demand. I mean, even right now it is quite in demand, but in 2020s, during the period of COVID, this plant was priced at a very expensive rate. But right now the prices are starting to drop, just like other aroids and other foliage plants. But this was a very expensive plant probably 2 to 3 years back, but now it's getting a little bit more common, and because of a lot of propagation, it's coming back in the market and it's at much affordable rate right now. So guys, that's all about it. I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button, and if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to it. Until then, take care, stay safe and keep propagating.